Demons. They've haunted our imaginations, fueled our nightmares, and sparked endless fascination through the centuries. But how much do we really know about these entities in all these ancient grimoires and texts? Well, this week, yet again, we're diving into the story of another demon, the mysterious and powerful demon known as Marbas. Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Florio. Welcome to the channel or welcome back to the channel. It's good to see you either way. Before we dive in, I'd just like to thank all the members of the channel, and as I speak, I'm just going to have their names popping up on the side here. This is yet another episode of Demystifying Demons. The purpose of this series is to do exactly that, demystify demons. I want to explain to you the history of demons, and each demon we'll take a look at, because the majority of them came from like pagan deities, old mythos, different folklore, things like that. People are scared that demons are going to come hurt them or whatever it may be. And the purpose of this series is to kind of like make you understand that they're not really demons, they're not really scary. The majority of them are actually gods and goddesses and proto-gods and whatnot that people prayed to, and they were important figures to people back in the day. So each episode we're going to be delving into a demon. We're working through the Ars Goetia, and eventually we'll work onto some other books and texts as well. I know a few of you have made some requests. I'll probably do some one-off videos for some things too, so keep an eye out for that. But today we're going to take a look at the lion-headed demon Marbas, who is both a healer and a bringer of disease. So let's peel back the centuries, exploring his literary journey and uncovering fascinating connections to ancient pagan traditions. Are the images of lions, plagues, and healing clues to an older, deeper origin story? Let's start with the literary references towards Marbas as the demon. Demonic references. Since all of our demonic literature references come from the same three texts, give or take, let me just remind you of the years each of them were released. There's the first text, the main one that we were working with, is the Ars Goetia, which is part of the Lesser Key of Solomon, which was released in the 1600s. Supposedly it was based on texts from centuries earlier, but it's all connected with the Testament of Solomon and the other texts that go with that. And they were all written around this time. The second book that we look at when it comes to these particular demons is Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal, which is the Infernal Dictionary. It's French. It was written 1818. And then the last book that we're looking at is John Wyer's Pseudo Monarchiae Daemon, which is the False Monarchy of Demons, Italian. And that was written in 1577. So that one is kind of written a little bit before the Ars Goetia. So the point is, I'm trying to tell you the years that these books were written to get you to understand that even though they're saying that these demons and these texts and all this stuff is from Solomon's time, it was actually written like way past when the Bible was written, and way past Solomon's time. So you've got to look at these books also in the time that they were written, because there's still like pagan worship and stuff going on at the time in the regions, and they were trying to still convert the last of the pagans to the one god religion. So if they turn one of the pagan deities into a demon, it vilifies their god, and it puts pressure on them to turn to the church and away from paganism. So while the majority of these should be linked somehow to, old world Mesopotamian Canaanite, deities, some of them have a better link to Greek, Nordic, Celtic, Egyptian, things like that as well, because they were trying to kind of hit up a lot of deities and vilify them into demons. So hopefully that you kind of understand a little bit about that. But anyways, in the Ars Goetia, Marbas holds the intriguing title of a great president of hell, making him notably distinct from other demons listed in the Ars Goetia. Rather than being categorized as royalty like a king, duke, or prince, Marbas is the first demon in the Ars Goetia to carry the title of great president, which stands apart from the traditional European hierarchy used in demonology. So he's not like a royalty, he's a president. So that's interesting. And what exactly a president means compared to these royal titles, it isn't really clear. In fact, the titles in general don't really get explained in the Solomon text at all. However, Marbas commands over 36 legions of spirits, and that puts him above the other demons with the higher ranks. And these are the first 10 demons, I think it's 10, within the false gods area. So what we've already looked at, Agares is a duke, and he commands 31 legions of spirits. And Visago, a prince, commands 26 legions. So Marbas actually commands more legions of spirits, but holds the title of president, which isn't royalty. So it's interesting. Marbas is also yet another demon who does not appear in Colin de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary. There's a few of them that don't show up in his book. And there isn't really a clear explanation as to why, but it's interesting to understand that there is demons omitted from it. Despite this, he does appear in John Weyer's earlier text, False Monarchy of Demons from 1577, but he's under a slightly different name, which is Barbas. So in this book, The False Monarchy of Demons, it describes Barbas vividly as appearing in the form of a mighty lion, though he can shift to a human form when commanded. Weyer attributes Marbas with dual powers. He can both inflict and cure diseases, uncover hidden truths, grant wisdom in the mechanical arts, and even alter people's shapes. And that repeats itself in the Ars Goetia about Marbas. So the Ars Goetia emphasizes that Marbas' abilities as a revealer of secrets, a source of wisdom, a healer or bringer of illness. And, he appears as a lion and he can help shapeshift people into a lion and everything too. So it only makes sense that we connect the dots that Barbas and Marbas are the same. They're the same demon. They just ended up with different names in these different texts. But in general, the dual role strongly echoes older mythological traditions, suggesting that Marbas was originally inspired by ancient archetypes of plague gods and divine healers. And having this duality makes him something of like a balance, a spirit of balance. And as well, if we go back to the Marbas versus Barbas, the subtle variation in names between the sources, it indicates that this demon was historically known by two similar sounding identities, adding another layer to the intriguing backstory. Marbas also shares a connection with and the Ars Goetia, 10th demon, Beur, another president of hell. Both Marbas and Beur have dominion over disease, possessing the dual power to either heal or cause illness. Their shared abilities create a unique symbiotic relationship, placing them side by side as demons associated with the complex power of disease and healing. And when we get out of false gods and we get into the next one, then that is his duality person that the Ars Goetia essentially says they work together. So we already explained a little bit, but let's get into more detail about what Marbas looks like. Imagery and iconography. As the Ars Goetia describes Marbas, and I quote, "The fifth spirit is Marbas. He is great president and appeared at first in the form of a great lion. But afterwards, at the request of the master, he putteth on human shape. He answereth truly of things hidden or secret. He causeth diseases and cureth them. Again, he giveth great wisdom and knowledge in mechanical arts, and can change men into other shapes. He governeth 36 legions of spirits, and his seal is this, which is to be worn as aforesaid." And again, Colin de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary doesn't make reference to Marbas. But in the False Monarchy of Demons, this is what it says about Barbas. "Barbas is a great president, and appeareth in the form of a mighty lion. But at the commandment of the conjurer cometh up in the likeness of a man, and answereth fully as touching anything which is hidden or secret. He bringeth diseases and cureth them. He promises wisdom and the knowledge of mechanical arts or handicrafts. He changeth men into other shapes, and under his presidency or government are 36 legions of devils contained." The devils thing is also interesting because in Ars Goetia they talk about demons, which I would assume is devils, and then spirits. But in this one they call the spirits devils, so it's interesting. Marbas will be the most fearsome looking demon seen in the Ars Goetia so far that we've looked at. The text tells us that when Marbas is first summoned, he appears in his lion form, not even with a human body. This is probably suggesting a test to the summoner to see if they're going to fear the lion before moving on to the next step, which, at the request of the summoner, assuming this is someone who knows what they're doing, that Marbas will revert to a more passive form, which is a man with the head of a lion. Still a fearsome visage, though. Having the head of a lion and body of a man, the lion, of course, known as the king of the jungle and an apex predator, contributes to Marbas's frightening reputation. In the underworld, he might very well be the ultimate predator, with his power and strength ensuring that he cannot be hunted by fellow spirits or creatures. Furthermore, by possessing the body of a man, Marbas adopts the perfect duality of man and beast. He has the speed and ferocity of a lion, but he also has the stature and nobility of a man. And again, we have duality a lot that shows up in these demons. Also, he is known as the chief engineer of the infernal plane, which is framed around his intellect, which we're going to get into next. Powers and abilities. So what is it exactly that Marbas can do for the summoner? To start, he offers the ability to teach someone to shapeshift into a lion, which, as we move through the rest of the Ars Goetia, you'll find any demon that looks like an animal or something can offer that ability. But so that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like some of the previous demons, he appears to be very wise, and he can answer questions that might seem impossible, those that are hidden or secret. This likely pertains to knowledge that we as humans, at least in a religious or biblical sense, are not meant to know. Perhaps information that pertains to the heavenly realms or God himself. You might say that Marbas offers this tantalizing yet most certainly forbidden wisdom, a gift that most people would be hard-pressed to say no to. Him being, an engineer, maybe he understands the engineer of life and creation itself. As we've seen in the story of Adam and Eve, mankind was never meant to have the knowledge that they ended up possessing. And so it isn't out of the question that there was even more knowledge that remained hidden to us. Marbas also has profound knowledge in mechanical arts, leading us to believe that despite his alarming lion profile, he does have an engineering and artistic mind, allowing him to create and or modify mechanical things. The knowledge of Marbas when it comes to the structure of things is extremely extensive. This is where he's called the chief engineer of the infernal plane. Marbas, his passion is in the structure of things. It's also why he's such a good healer, because he understands the underlying mechanisms that form our body, both physically and energetically. And this also might be part of his, knowledge that we aren't supposed to have, because he understands how the body works. Thus, life. Everything in nature is an accumulation of energy, and Marbas is a master when it comes to this architecture and the energy. This is why he's not just a teacher of knowledge, but also a demon who affects our human bodies. Marbas is said to be able to cure diseases, so it can be assumed that he was summoned to ease a person's suffering or even heal them altogether. But again, he's a demon who has a lot of duality in him, so Marbas can also be a bringer of disease. Marbas can be commanded by the summoner to afflict someone with illness, or that he might even cause illness upon those who have summoned him if they're inexperienced or if they offend him in some way. So he can be quite a destructive and dangerous being. With the Black Plague happening during these times, Marbas could have been blamed for some of it too. The bringer of disease is also a clue into some of his possible pagan origins. But first, let's look at the etymology of the word Marbas and where it comes from. Etymology. Okay, let's take a look at the origins of Marbas and Barbas. The name Marbas is generally believed to be a variation of Barbas, which itself comes from the Latin barba, meaning beard. Across Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French, barba was commonly used as a nickname for a bearded man, a detail that likely carried symbolic weight when naming a figure like Marbas. often associated with wisdom and hidden knowledge. Also, there's something to be said too about like a man with, the big scruffy beard. And if he has like a bit of like nice long hair, it kind of looks like a lion mane as well. So there's a little bit of symbolism in that too. I do find it interesting that the word barba is beard because barber is really close to it. So I guess that kind of derived from it. In some northern Italian dialects, barba evolved to mean uncle, often referring to an older respected man, a familiar figure tied to authority and insight. Greek usage followed suit, using barbas as a respectful way to refer to an elder, again hinting at a reverence and familiarity. As a surname, Barbas turns up in multiple cultures with similar meanings, from bearded one in Spanish and Portuguese to a potential derivative of Barbas in Hungarian. There's also a theory that links Barbas to the herb hellebore, which was used in magical practices sometimes and in summoning rites. That connection could suggest that Marbas has roots not just in language, but in the world of old herbal magic and pagan plant lore. And with them trying to, get the pagans to go away, it could have been a link there. So some demonologists have gone further, speculating on Semitic influences. The Hebrew word mar can mean bitter and may tie the concept of bitterness, though that interpretation remains speculative and symbolic at best. But some people have put that out there as a possibility. All right, now let's get into the possible pagan origins of Marbas. Pagan origins. And just a reminder, when I say pagan origins, pagan is really anything that came before this one god religion, to be honest. So it's not just like Celtic stuff and witches. It's like old world religions and stuff that, like Canaanite people followed, and ancient Egyptian is pagan, ancient Greece and Rome, that's pagan as well. So it's just really anything that kind of came before the Bible took hold of everything. So that's what we're getting into when we say pagan. Marbas doesn't have a clear counterpart in ancient mythology like some of the other demons that we've looked at. But that doesn't mean that his origins are entirely original. I don't think he was invented for the Ars Goetia, because we have some options here. We're still within the false gods pantheon of the Ars Goetia, so that means that Marbas must have a pagan deity counterpart. Most scholars believe the counterparts are ones from Mesopotamian culture, but I like to also branch out, like I said, as technically these texts were written during the Renaissance era, so anything really is fair game for the origin of some of these beings. But of course, this one isn't so easy to find. Some of these demons, like Baal, make it simple. There's a one-to-one, we know where he came from. But some of them require us to do a bit of digging and come up with multiple possibilities. And there was a lot. I will go over quite a bit of options. I did cut them down a lot. And I'm going to explain their relation, and then I'll explain which one I think is the closest origin. I'd also love for you guys to leave a comment. Let me know which one you think it might be as well. Like I said, I had a ton of possible deities on my list, but I've tried to narrow it down as best I could. With him being like a bringer of plague and a healer, I thought we could narrow it down more, but there's a lot of them out there. And the lion thing, there's a lot too. So I picked out the ones that I thought were the most interesting or best match. But let's begin first with the Mesopotamia region. Like I said, it's believed that the deities, these demons, they came from this region, this culture, everything in Mesopotamia, Canaanite, Sumerian, Babylonian, and so forth. So we're going to look at them because there is a couple really good matches, and I did cut out a few others, but these are the top two, I think, from Mesopotamia that I think fit the best. All right, the first one, Latarak. Latarak was a Mesopotamian god. He was most likely depicted as a figure clad in a lion's skin, or perhaps as a lion-like monster. He is regarded as a protective deity, invoked to defend doorways and ward off diseases. He was closely associated with Lulal, though the relationship between them varies between available primary sources, with some saying they were identical, but others treating them as like a pair, like a couple. So he seemed like a pretty good fit because he was explained as being a lion and, someone who also helped with healing too. But then the second one that I think might be a good fit is Nergal, the Mesopotamian god of plague and war and the underworld, embodying the harsher aspects of the sun's power and all-consuming destruction. Nergal was originally associated with the ferocity of the midday summer sun, bringing scorching heat and pestilence with it. Over time, he became known as a lord of the dead and husband to Ereshkigal, I may have mispronounced that, ruling over the underworld city of Kutha as co-regent of the afterlife. His nature is fierce and violent. He brings war and epidemic as instruments of divine wrath. As well, a lot of people say that Era is another god from that time, and Era became Nergal. So in mythology, Nergal and Era, most famous tale is the Era epic, wherein he goes on a rampage and even causes Babylon's temporary fall, illustrating his very volatile temperament. Visual depictions of Nergal present him as a warrior on his prime, often with weapons like a mace or sword in hand. He is also sometimes shown with a lion iconography, such as a lion-headed scepter or two lion figures on his throne. Since the lion's ferocity and the burning sun heat were analogs for Nergal's destructive power. There is one carving that they found where Nergal's mace, his weapon, actually had two lion heads. So he's very much connected to the sun. He was originally a solar deity. So all of these imagery with the weapons, the lion, the flame, it all conveys this identity as a wrathful being, devastation and death, whose power was invoked to combat enemies and evil, but also appease to prevent plague. And here's the thing, right? I think that there could be connections with sun because it looks like a lion mane, just like a beard does too. So I did pull out a couple things like that I thought may be connected as well. And with his power and everything with the lion, I think it kind of makes sense. And then he is a bringer of disease, but they don't have him as a cure of illness. And that's the only thing. It's kind of like those are the two best ones I thought from this region. But I thought with him, because we're in the false gods area, this guy was like the lord of the underworld, right? So I thought that maybe this might be a pretty good match for someone who's in the false gods pantheon. Okay, now let's take a look at some other regions and cultures. Like I mentioned, these books were written during the Renaissance, so anything on the eastern side of the world is fair game for this stuff. Egypt and surrounding areas. All right, next is Mahis. Having trouble pronouncing that one. He is the ancient Egyptian lion-headed god of war, whose name means he who is true beside her. He was seen as the son of the creator god Ptah, as well as the feline goddess Bast in Lower Egypt, or Sekhmet in Upper Egypt. Bast and Sekhmet were like the same. It gets a little confusing. They share the nature, whose nature is shared. So he was a deity associated with war, protection, and weather, as well as that of knives, lotuses, and devouring captives. This matches the description of Marbas, as we see links to disease. Knives and war can also be linked to knowledge and engineering back then, because back then, like weaponry and tools and such were the engineering and the mechanics. And he's a god of protection and weather, which also controls illness for the good and the bad. So his cult following was centered in Terimu and Perbast, the cult centers of Sekhmet and Bast, respectively. The name Mahis begins with the hieroglyphs for the male lion, although in isolation it also means one who can see in front. Some of the titles of Mahis were Lord of Slaughter, Wielder of the Knife, and the Scarlet Lord. Now let's take a look at his mother. Sekhmet was a powerful and complex goddess in ancient Egyptian religion, known as the goddess of war, healing, and plague. She was often depicted as a woman with a lioness head, reflecting her association with strength and the fierce nature of the desert. Sekhmet was revered as a protector against disease and a bringer of both life and death. She was actually said to breed the plagues as the Eye of Ra, yet she was also venerated as a healer and protector. Sekhmet's dual epithet as both a lady of terror and a lady of life is a clear prototype for the duality of Marbas as well. I think that she may be the better fit for Marbas when it comes to ancient Egyptian deities, but considering that the cults would worship both her son, and Bast respectively, it was like a trio worship situation. Together, they would worship them all. So Marbas could be a demon in the false gods area, which is high up on the list because he encompasses 3 Egyptian deities, and that's pretty powerful. Also, you may have heard of Sekhmet, the story, where she was sent to the mortal plane to punish the humans, and she just bloodlust took her and she could not stop killing. And they had to fill the Nile with like red blood and beer to get her drunk so that she would fall asleep and stop the killing. And a lot of people actually like link her to say that she's the first story of a vampire, the first story of something centered around drinking blood, which is interesting. All right, our next one in the region, Epidemic. Epidemic was a war god worshipped by the Meroitic peoples inhabiting Kush. This period was from 300 BC to 350 AD in what is now known as Sudan. So this was the Kushite peoples. This included people from both eastern and western deserts, as well as immigrants from Egypt. So this god was a major deity to the ancient Kushite and Nubian peoples and wasn't really in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Technically, this falls under Egypt, like I have it in this area of Egypt, but this was more an area of peoples who didn't follow ancient Egyptian pantheon, or, they were kind of like a little bit of a different country, but nearby. Instead, a lot of people believe that Egyptians associated this god with Amun in their pantheon. Also, the name is believed to stand for Father King. Epidemic was depicted with a lion head and human torso. He symbolized martial power, military conquest, and empire. Even though people have said that he's in the ancient Egyptian pantheon as Amun, he is often considered the equivalent of Mehis, lion-headed war god of Egypt. Despite a claim that the two are not counterparts, which, again, Mehis could also be a fit for Marbas. And we have, again, another deity that is a combination of multiple deities, which is extra strength behind it, too. Marbas could be a representation of all of them together, as also lions were used in artistic depictions a lot back then because they were strong, creatures. And eventually, the lion motif molded itself as time went on. All right, let's now hop into a different region. The Greco Roman mythology. All right, our first one is Apollo. Apollo in the Greco Roman tradition has a comparable duality. Apollo delivered people from epidemics, yet could bring ill health and deadly plague with his arrows. Apollo was worshipped as a god of healing through his sun, though, but he was feared as the sender of plagues. Much as Marbas is invoked to cure diseases he himself might inflict. So essentially, like, Apollo makes people sick and his son cures them. So it's this weird duality thing again. Very common motif with this mythology stuff and deities. Apollo was also the god of the oracle of Delphi, who got their visions from. So he also was someone who dispensed knowledge humans did not have, which makes him a good candidate for Marbas. All right, our next god is Mars. Mars is the deity that the modern day occultists most often associate with Marbas. So let me go into a bit more detail on why they believe Mars and Marbas are one and the same. I do think that it's the name that originally connected them, and then people have made these connections going forward. In ancient Roman mythology, Mars wasn't just the god of war. He also doubled as a protector of agriculture. War and farming were both essential to survival, and Mars was the powerhouse behind both of them. Most of his festivals happened in March, which was named after him, and also in October. These 2 months were related to both military and agricultural cycles. Mars wasn't just about brute strength, though. He was also tied to V, which was the life force, and Virtus, which was virtue or masculine courage. His link to life can also be linked to Marbas's ability to heal and cause disease. Also, as a guardian of the fields, his role wasn't just to fight, it was to create the conditions for growth. This means protecting the food from the destructive forces of nature, keeping pests and blight at bay. Again, this is similar to controlling disease, and the mold on wheat was often a concern. It looked black and sickly like disease. It caused ergot poisoning if ingested too. So there's a link here in the symbolism about, causing disease. One of the more fascinating rituals tied to Mars comes from the Arvel brothers, a priesthood that called on him to ward off rust, which had a clever double meaning. Rust could refer to the blight that attacked the weed or the reddish corrosion that damaged farm tools and weapons alike. This also again links into the disease, like I said, but weapons too, because weapons and tools, like I said, were engineering and technology of this day. And Marbas has great knowledge in mechanics and engineering. The animals sacred to Mars were the wolf and the woodpecker. Both were seen as fierce, loyal, and full of symbolic power. Romans believed these two creatures always lived in the same rugged hills and forests, making them natural companions in Mars's domain, both on the battlefield and in the fields of the crops. As the wolf acts as the king of the forest, the lion is the king of the jungles. So you could make a connection there because they didn't have lions, but they had wolves. So, wolf is the stronger one. So a lot of the modern day occultists, they really see many links between Marbas and Mars. And you will see this when we get into the ritual symbolism section shortly as well. Now, Mars gets connected in with some Celtic lore. So let's take a look at that. The Celts. So Mars became incorporated into a number of Celtic deities. There are a ton, but I pulled out one that I think is the best match. So if Marbas became Mars, who then became incorporated into a Celtic deity, then that would make sense for it to become one of the false gods that the church wanted to demonize to get people to stop worshiping. There might be some better examples, but the one that I thought could be related is Mars Neton, or his other name is Neto. This one deity essentially started as Neto in Liberia, but was eventually shaped into a Celtic war god. Neto was a god of war, the sun, and possibly also a god of knowledge, security, and order in ancient Liberian culture. He wore a radiant crown like a sun god because the passion to act with valor was a kind of heat. He was known as the Lord of the Ray and was associated with the sun's power. The name Neto, or it might even be pronounced Neto, is also linked to the Celtic war god Neat. And this also is in Irish mythology. Neat was a god of war in Irish mythology too. So it's all interconnected, right? He kind of traveled. The Proto-Celtic Neat means fighting or passion. And this deity appears on a few inscriptions that people found as a Romanized Mars Neto, and then it got linked to Neat. They found some different archaeological proof that shows that it transformed that way. I know this is very confusing because all the names are very similar, but hopefully that made sense. So pretty much they found proof of this deity in Liberia and then on plaques as it made its way north into Rome. And then they found it written out in Celtic religions. And then they found it in Ireland. It's an interesting transformation, and I thought I would add it in here as I just found it kind of interesting how religious symbols and deities crossed borders and were shaped into completely different cultures. Now, that's all the deities that I pulled out. There were a ton that I actually cut because surprisingly, like I said, the depiction of Marbas shows up a lot in history. And I don't know, I think I had 15 of them down or something, so there was a lot that I cut. So, while the medieval grimoires present Marbas in a Christian-influenced demonic framework, these attributes strongly resemble those of a lot of other pagan gods of plague, healing, and secret knowledge. So, of course, it makes sense that Marbas' legend arose from the demonization of an ancient deity or spirit that was repackaged by occult scholars. So, which one do I think could be the best contender? Well, I understand that the modern occultists love to associate Marbas with Mars. We can't forget that these demons are supposed to be based around deities and spirits in the Mesopotamian and nearby regions. So I think that the best match is Nergal or Latrak, the two ones from the Mesopotamia. However, my second choice, although I guess it's third, would be Sekhmet from ancient Egypt. Her with all three of her deities together, her son, and Bast. And Bast is technically her. It's confusing, I know. I think with Marbas being in the false gods list of the Ars Goetia, that makes him sit very high up on the hierarchy. I feel like he may embody a combination of multiple deities in the end. But leave a comment below and let me know, who do you think is the best fit for the origins of Marbas? Okay, so now to match with my other videos, let's discuss a bit about modern practices and the media as well. Modern day practices. I find it interesting to discuss how these deities turned Jinn spirits turned demons have evolved into modern day practices. Again, like I've said before, I'm not teaching you how to invoke them. There are other resources out there that do that. The purpose of this series is to explore the evolution of a mythos. In contemporary occultism, Marbas remains a respected figure, particularly within traditions like Goetic magic, demon magics, and chaos magic. For instance, chaos magicians and Luciferian witches, they see him as an ideal blend of old wisdom and modern practicality. Practitioners frequently invoke Marbas to help cure illnesses, reveal hidden causes behind diseases, or even support projects involving engineering, computer coding, technology. They adapt his historical role of teaching mechanical skills to today's world. Within these modern circles, many see him as neutral or even benevolent, like a respected teacher who shares hidden knowledge and healing arts. And this makes sense as Marbas is a figure of duality. He isn't evil or good. He can do both, suggesting that he is actually a being of balance. However, these accounts also highlight the importance of approaching Marbas with respect and seriousness. Just like the warnings in the ancient grimoire, practitioners note that casual or disrespectful summoning might invite challenges or even temporary illness as a test of sincerity. Ultimately, modern magical traditions continue to present Marbas as a complex figure embodying powerful dualities. He's both a surgeon who heals and a teacher who tests. Ritual symbolism. In matching with the other videos in this series, I'm going to be going over the ritualistic symbolism that modern day occultists follow. So I'm going to try to keep it simple, and I'm just going to go over the symbolism sort of in a list here. All right, let's start with the day for summoning. The best day to summon Marbas is a Tuesday. Tuesday is associated with action, energy, and new beginnings, influenced by the fiery planet Mars. It's ideal for tackling challenges, asserting yourself, and getting things done. Also, some traditions view Tuesday as particularly blessed and linked even with the Earth's creation. Astrological sign. Marbas connects strongly with Leo, fitting well with his lion-like image as well. However, some practitioners align him with Aries or Scorpio due to their warlike and disease-associated traits. Given Marbas's preferred summoning dates are between April 9th and the 13th, Aries seems especially relevant for this particular astrological symbol. Direction. The direction to be facing when summoning him, best one is south. South is linked to fire, passion, creativity, and growth. It represents abundance, warmth, and realizing one's potential. Often connected with summer in indigenous peoples' traditions, the South symbolizes following your heart, truth, happiness, and nurturing self-worth. The planet. There's two planets that Marbas is connected to. One is Mercury, and this one seems to come up more often than Mars, which anyway. So Mercury is known for governing communication, intellect, and learning. And these are all traits that match his powers, revealing hidden knowledge and mastering complex skills. Mercury's swift nature reflects Marbas' ability to uncover and communicate truth effectively. However, obviously some are going to associate him with Mars because, they associate him with the pagan god Mars. And this is a warrior deity, and Mars thus being the planet of action, courage, determination, and raw energy. Mars's aggressive and ambitious traits can also represent Marbas's dual nature as a healer and destroyer. Metal. There are two metals that people associate with them, depending on which text and who you're talking to or looking at: brass and iron. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc. It's Marbas's primary metal, known for healing and facilitating communication. Brass reflects Marbas's transformative abilities and his role in revealing hidden truths. Its malleability and conductivity symbolizes Marbas's power as a channel for knowledge. However, like I said, some practitioners do prefer iron. Iron is known for strength, protection, courage, and overcoming obstacles. Iron's symbolism of control and fortitude resonates with the more forceful aspects of Marbas's character. Element. Marbas is associated with fire, embodying transformation, passion, energy, and enlightenment. Fire mirrors Marbas's unpredictable nature and his dual ability to heal or harm. Like fire, Marbas can bring illumination and healing or cause destruction, emphasizing the importance of responsibility in dealing with such power. Colors. Marbas is associated with red and black together. Red symbolizes primal energy, passion, strength, vitality, and creativity. It represents strong emotions and sensual pleasures. Black conveys power, strength, protection, hidden knowledge, mystery, and a connection between physical and spiritual worlds, which is very fitting of Marbas's deeper, mysterious attributes. Offerings. The typical offerings for Marbas include incense like dragon's blood, frankincense or myrrh, or sandalwood. Other suitable offerings are brass items, handwritten letters containing requests, or crafted objects representing the dedication to learning or to master a skill. These offerings demonstrate respect and sincere intention towards Marbas. Okay, let's take a look at media. Modern day literature and media. Outside the occult and esoteric communities, Marbas, also as a reminder is known as Barbas, frequently pops up in popular culture. Probably his most famous mainstream appearance is as the villain Marbas from the TV show Charmed. Marbas, this character, is known as the Demon of Fear, and he became one of the series' most iconic recurring antagonists. Although the show borrowed only his name, it was still like an intentional nod to the historical demon Marbas. But keep in mind, if you watch the show or if you recognize this from the show, their depiction is only shared in name. The stuff that they showed this demon doing isn't what Marbas does in any of the historical texts. Beyond television, Marbas also features in the Hellboy comics. They reference him alongside other Ars Goetia demons, positioning Marbas as one of the formidable entities within the Hell's hierarchy, which makes sense as he sits in the false gods in the first top 5. Right? In the world of Japanese anime and gaming, Marbas appears in the RPG series Shin Megami Tensei, and they portray him as a lion-headed demon wielding powers over disease and hidden knowledge. Also, his lore and sigil have appeared in tabletop gaming bestiaries, demonologies, and rulebooks for franchises such as Dungeons & Dragons. In literature, Marbas's most detailed historical portrayal remains as the Ars Goetia, ensuring his complex character remains fascinating to readers and occultists alike. So, in short, the story of Marbas has come full circle. From ancient temples and medieval grimoires to modern books, rituals, and video games, Marbas represents the thin line between disease, healing, hidden knowledge, and revelation, reminding us that the power to harm and the power to heal often come from the same source. Either way, Marbas's true origins is just going to be debated over time, as we're never going to know for sure. His mythic presence continues regardless. But tell me, what do you think about Marbas? What are your thoughts? Leave a comment below. As well, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the rest of this series too. I will link everything at the end. I forgot to record a goodbye, so adding this in. Bye-bye. I'll see you next time.